Good Monday morning. This is Pastor Mark Pierce of Church Requel, and it's just great to be back here with you again today. We are in Matthew study number 97, and we are ready to pick up with Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. Before we get there, I just want to kind of bring us into focus a little bit. We are in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He has given us the Beatitudes, the blessings of what it is to be a Christ follower. And they are, as we looked at a few weeks ago, kind of an upside-down view of how we are to live and who really is blessed. Very different than perhaps what we usually think of in the world today. And then we have spent about a week or so talking about that Jesus came to fulfill the law, not to get rid of the law. And he ends by telling us that unless our righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees and the scribes, we'll not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Well, it's certainly worthwhile to know exactly what is it that Jesus means by this. Well, Jesus is going to explain this. And he gives us 6 different examples of how we, or at least how his audience, had understood the law and as it was given to them, and what it really meant according to Jesus. In other words, Jesus is saying, here is what you have heard, but I say to you, and then he goes on to say what he is going to say. This is how the law is to be fulfilled. This is how you are to live it out. And we certainly see not a change, not that Jesus says, well, I am going to just revolutionize everything. It really is a matter of radicalize. Now, that's kind of a new word for me, but what it really means is I want to get to the root of the matter. I want to take the law as you understand it, and I want to go to the very root, the very basis of how we should understand this and how you, as a Christ follower, can live out this law. If you want to follow me, Jesus is saying, here's how you will apply what you understand about the law to your day-to-day life. And oftentimes, in these 6 different examples where Jesus says, you have heard this, but I say to you, and he gives them his example, often he then goes on to give them a very practical, here's how you go about living it out. And we certainly see that being true in this very first example. So let's pick it up in verse 21. This is chapter 5, verse 21. And we will read it through to verse, let's just go through to verse 22 here, I think, at this point. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. Now, I am reminded of what, not exactly a theologian, but what someone said one time that really had an impact on me. That was Zig Ziglar, probably 30 or 40 years ago. I was a young salesperson at the time, and Zig Ziglar was one of the few people who stood up publicly, at least in my life, and took a stand for Christ. And at one time he said, it's not the things I don't understand about the Bible that bothers me, it's the things that I do understand. Well, here we have a pretty good understanding of what Jesus is getting to. You have heard it said to those of old that you should not murder. In other words, a physical act of killing somebody for personal reasons, for personal gain. You know what murder is. You shall not murder. But I say to you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to the judgment. In other words, Jesus here is saying, and again, you don't have to have a theological degree to understand this, that it's the anger in your heart that kills somebody, that murders someone. You've heard it said, don't murder someone physically, but I'm saying to you, if you've even thought that you would like to kill somebody in your mind, you've done just the same in God's eyes as murdering them. Now, we're going to take a look tomorrow at some different versions of this verse because, it does matter how you read this and what the language is, what the version is. There is a little bit of interpretation that goes on here. But the fact is, and it's very simple, Jesus is saying, let's take this the next most logical step. How do you keep from murdering someone physically? You stop it at the point where you might murder them in your mind. In other words, the physical act takes place after a long period of time, often, of building up this inward anger where we simply would wish someone else dead. We see that this is true from the very first time that murder took place between Cain and Abel. You might recall that Abel offered a sacrifice that was acceptable to God, and Cain did not. And Cain couldn't abide by that. And God deals with Cain's heart and tries to get him to stop and to think this through and to not hold this against his brother. And of course, Cain not only thinks murder in his heart against Abel, but actually goes and kills Abel. God is saying here, Jesus, I should say, is saying about God that he looks at the inward heart. Now, if this is true, and this is the case, which one of us, which one of you or me is not guilty of murdering someone in our heart, of not being angry with someone? Well, this would probably leave no one on this earth unguilty. And I think that would be a pretty good place to stop here for this Monday, to simply ask, where am I at? Where am I guilty of being just angry at an anger that just burns and continues to burn? Not just a sudden flare-up, but something that I just can't get rid of my heart. Where do I need to be healed? Maybe there's someone that's in your life that you think of when I am talking about this right now. Maybe what you should do would be just to take a break from the Bible and go to prayer and say, Lord, I know I am really struggling here, and can you help me get rid of this anger that I have in my heart? Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again on Tuesday morning.